Welcome back to this special edition of Liberate Your Authentic Self. I am talking with one of the contributing authors to Time to Rise. It is Sarah Kate Brandis from the UK. And Sarah, in your chapter, Finding My Why, you really take us through some of these experiences, starting with your existential crisis. And I've said this before, I've just been really fascinated that you could leave home at 16 and, go this circuitous path, but eventually really find your passion. So you mentioned in the book that you were completely overwhelmed when you first left home, because all of a sudden it's like, okay, I got to take care of myself. I got to find food. You're running around with different kinds of people. So what kind of different jobs does a 16-year-old in England get? I mean, like in America, I remember having a job at 16. I mean, I think I was delivering pizza because I had my own car, but what were you doing?
Wow, you had a car? Gosh, it took me a long time to learn to drive. I was doing the National Express for a long time, which is our cheapo coach service in the UK. So the very first job, and the one that helped me leave home, I was 16 and a half. It was November in 1997. And I got a live-in job because I thought that would be a really good, smart way to get a roof over my head without having to deal with a landlord and get an income. I'd been really into horses when I was younger. I've always loved animals. As you know me as the cat lady. Yeah. But I was very much into horses at the time. So I got a job as a stable hand, which allowed me to leave home abruptly, move across the country and have my accommodation provided for me. Unfortunately, it was a total nightmare that lasted about 2 weeks. The other stable girls were complete. The head girl was an absolute bully. I was really vulnerable when I left home. It's funny, living with slightly intimidating and unhinged parents, I thought that was the worst I was going to experience in life until I entered the real world. And then suddenly you realize there are a whole bunch of adults out there who've got their issues, and the head girl at this yard was one of them. So I lasted 2 weeks before I got back on the National Express and went back to my hometown and stayed with a friend for weeks until I sorted myself out with the next job. The next job was in a shoe shop. So in the UK, we now have the national minimum wage, which is a minimum amount per hour that people can be paid. This predated that. So in 1998, I was paid about £2 something per hour to work. I know, right? To work full time in this shoe shop. So I think my take home was about £100 per week.
And they're like, in a shoe shop, there's no tips.
Oh no, yeah, we're not a tipping culture anyway. So even if it was a restaurant, I wouldn't have had much to hope for. So it just about paid my room rent. I had a room in a shared house, and I could buy a little bit of food. I ate a lot of bread, a lot of cheap stuff, and that was pretty intense. And then years went by and I started to gain a few more skills and get slightly better paid per hour jobs. But there was a point where I got frustrated with that. And somebody put in my head the idea of being a table dancer at Spearmint Rhino. And this was
wait. Define that. A table dancer? Because that brings to mind like stripper, lap dancing. What is a table dancer?
It's almost like lap dancing, but it's a little bit more reserved because we're British. So there are clubs that are lap dancing clubs where it's very much very, very close and there's no contact, but it's very, very close. And then there's tableside dancing, as we called it at the Spearmint Rhino in the UK, which was the idea was you stood next to the drinks table and that's where you danced. So you weren't right on top of the customer, but you were quite close. You were visible, and that's what we called it.
How much clothing or how little clothing did you have on?
I kept my shoes on.
Okay.
That was it, really.
And wait. Now, who is it that told you about this job?
So it was a boyfriend at the time, and boy, did he regret saying this because he didn't mean it. He was joking. He said something about, I don't even know where the idea came from, but it came out of his mouth and it landed with me. And I went, I could make real money. I could work real money. And I was so excited about the thought of making real money and not being chained to a desk or a shoe counter or touching people's sweaty feet for 8-10 hours a day. So I thought, you know what? why not try it? And I did try it. And
so
I failed.
How long did that last?
3 years in total.
No way.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks as a horse hand and 3 years as a table dancer.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And so was the money better?
Yes and no. It's funny how you adapt really quickly and start living to your means. So as soon as you've got more money coming in, if you don't know how to handle it, straight out the window. And that's so true of life in general. Like if you haven't learned how to handle it,
absolutely,
it doesn't matter how much is coming in, whether it's energy, money, education, life lessons, whatever it is, straight out again if you don't know what you're doing. So I wasn't prepared for the hiking earnings. So, I started buying costumes for work and shoes and handbags and things and, drinking and doing other bad stuff that you do when you're like 21, 22. So yeah, it's not like I made a bunch of money, invested it in property and became stable. I made more money, but I spent more money and life was really just the same, except for I'd gone from working days to nights and I had a stage name.
What was your stage name?
Oh, I had a few. My first one was Eve.
Eve. Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then later on, when I changed clubs, I became Rachel. Because I really liked the actress Rachel Weisz. I always wanted to look like her. So I was like, I'll just take her name. I'm never going to grow her eyebrows. It's not going to happen, but I can take her name. So I did that.
How did you get out of table dancing?
Ooh. It was kind of gradual. I realized after a while that it wasn't making me happy either. It was just a different kind of living from paycheck to paycheck. When I realized that, I knew I had to get out of it, but I also knew that having table dancer on your CV, your resume, it's not great. So I needed to get something more current on my curriculum vitae that was not table dancing. So alongside my hours at the club, I would go and work in the bar next door and do a bit of bar work. So I learned how to pull pints and make cocktails and shots and stuff. And then at least when I wanted to apply for something bigger, I'd then have something on my CV that wasn't Eve at the Spearmint Rhino. So that actually became the next little career move. I got more experienced at the bar work and I ended up blagging my way into a management role in a music venue in central London.
All right. So you are quite the crafty one, aren't you?
Bit of a grifter.
You're not going to let anything hold you down.
That job probably shouldn't have been mine. I'd applied for the assistant manager's job and that was a stretch. I'd been a supervisor at best. And in Bournemouth, which is a little seaside town, nothing like London, where I was applying for the assistant manager's role. And then 6 weeks into being the assistant manager, my general manager got promoted up the chain to area manager. So he took me out to lunch and I knew something was up and I thought he was going to fire me. I was like, oh, what does he want to talk to me about? And actually he asked me to take his job and he was like, either you do it or I'll have to hire somebody new in over you. And that won't be very good for you. And also it means I've got to recruit and train someone else, which is a pain for me. So please take the job. So I did. And then I had to learn really quickly how to be a manager. That was an experience.
Well, was he at least a nice boss as opposed to what you've experienced? Yeah.
He was cool. And he's the same guy that was my boss at the job where I had the existential crisis. We moved companies together. And I think this is why I was so disappointed in our relationship towards the end, because he had been this mentor to me. He'd been really supportive. He'd taught me everything that I'd learned about running a pub or a venue. And then when we moved on to our final working position together, I felt like he'd kind of lost his love for it and he was a bit disillusioned. And that really, selfishly, that made me really disappointed. I was like, I need you to motivate me. Why can't you motivate me? And because he wasn't with it anymore, it lost its shine for me as well. But you know what? It wasn't meant to be because I was meant to do something else.
Clearly. So I don't know that my audience knows that this lovely woman, Sarah, she's handling a lot of the social media stuff for me at Make Your Mark Global. And she does it incredibly well, but I didn't even know some of this backstory. So I'm getting an earful. So after university, so take me from university to where you really started to find your passion, because then there was even more, like you started studying life coaching, and I mean, you've been all over the block.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing still. Like, I'd found stuff that I was passionate about, psychology, neuroscience, wonderful. It was so fascinating, but it's not exactly a vocational degree. It's not like studying paramedic science where you then follow a very obvious path and become a paramedic. You get a degree in cognitive neuroscience, which was a new degree anyway. You graduate and then you go, oh, what do I do? And then you're thrown back into the new world after graduation. And, you know, it's like the old world that you knew before, but you've got all this expectation on you now because you've spent 30K getting a qualification to make your life better. You've kind of got to make your life better, you know, or you disappoint yourself, you disappoint the people around you. So it was like starting all over again. And yeah, I still didn't know what I was going to do. So I thought about therapy. I wondered if I wanted to be a therapist, but I knew that that meant going back to uni and spending more money I didn't have and more years. And bear in mind that this all started from an existential crisis. I didn't feel like, you know, time was something that I had on my side. I'm in my early 30s at this point, and to some degree, I think I live in a permanent state of existential dread. I'm always like, when am I going to, you know, fulfill my destiny? So right. I didn't want to spend more years studying. I wanted to start doing. So I came across life coaching as a way to do something similar that was still helping people, but also that I could qualify in much quicker, because it took less than 1 year, about 9 months to qualify at that time. So I thought, this is an obvious path for me. So I started studying with the life coaching school that I'd chosen. And this is where things got interesting, because I discovered that actually I wasn't meant to be in this kind of work. I found that out through practice. It was through working with practice clients and doing the thing that coaches do, where they sit there and they listen and they facilitate, but they don't advise and they don't get involved. And that really didn't sit well with me. I'm a hands-on person, and I'm bossy as when I'm consulting. And I want that. I want that interaction with people. I want to help. I don't want to sit back passively and facilitate. And I know that is a form of helping. And when I'm coached, I love that. I absolutely love being coached, but I don't want to be a coach. So I found that out while I was studying coaching. Also at the same time, the coaching school had a position become available, which I filled. So they needed someone to do marketing. And I was, you know, fresh out of uni, still doing my student job, desperately searching for a day job while I was studying coaching, just so I could start paying my way in the world again. So while I was looking for this job, the job at the coaching school came up, and I had no qualifications in marketing whatsoever, but I had a really keen interest in it.
Yeah, so no experience never stops you. You're just like, hey, I can do this.
Here's a crazy idea. Let me chase that down a rabbit hole. All or nothing, full on. So I'd back at uni, I'd been making use of my free time while the younger kids had been out drinking in the summer holidays. I'd had my laptop out and I'd been writing my first book. I'd always had this dream of writing my own story, explaining my childhood, explaining the psychology behind what I thought was going on with my family dynamic. I thought it was interesting enough to make into a book. So I'd been carrying around this very sad blue folder of scrappy paper since I'd left home, from place to place, everywhere I'd lived. I'd taken this scrappy book of notes in a blue folder, and I knew that one day it would be a book. So during my free time in the uni summer holidays, I turned it into a book and I self-published it through Amazon, so on Kindle. And this was where my interest in marketing was born, because I had this idea, and you're going to laugh because you're in publishing. I had this idea that I'd write a book, I'd put it on the internet, and some sort of magic would happen, and I'd be rich and famous, and I'd be like the author, you know?
Right, right. Well, you're not the only one. You're not the only one who holds that fantasy in their mind.
Oh, yeah.
So how did the book do?
I wrong. Sorry?
How did the book do?
So it didn't do very well at first. So this is when I realized I had to learn something about marketing. So I started taking online courses and reading books and educating myself on what marketing even was. So all through uni, I'd been studying a bit of marketing on the side as well. And over time, the book started to do a bit better. When I put it on free promotion or on Kindle Countdown, it would go to #1 in the mental health chart, which I was really pleased about. But yeah, that was quite an education. And I'm so glad that I started learning about marketing because I discovered a passion. I thought it was fascinating how much human psychology there is in marketing. I didn't realize there'd be a crossover, but there really is. And so long story short, when this job came up at the coaching school and they were looking for a marketer, I was like, I don't have a qualification, but I've got some really interesting things that I could put on a slide deck and show them at an interview. So I did that. I made a slide deck showing my book and then the things that I'd learnt and the marketing campaign that I'd put in place. I put it all out on a deck and I turned up to this interview and I did my little presentation and I got the job. So to be fair, there wasn't much competition. There was like one other guy, but I got the job.
I love it. So you were your own case study. That's awesome, your book. Well, when we get back from the break, I'd love to take it to that next step because eventually, this was your first sort of marketing job, but I want to talk about where you are now and what does the future look like for you? Because obviously I love working with you and I know you're working with some fabulous people doing social media marketing. But I have this sneaky suspicion that your future has even more in store. So let's pick it up there when we get back. You're watching Liberate Your Authentic Self with me, Dr. Andrea Pennington. Check me out on Instagram at Dr. Andrea Pennington. And now back to the show. So I am so excited to dive into the story of finding my why with Sarah Brandis, who's hailing from the UK. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me. This is my first radio interview. I'm very excited.
And what a way to start, right? Bearing your all on American radio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought, well, I'm quite an all or nothing personality. So I thought if I'm going to share, I'm here to share today. Yeah.
Well, let's just jump right in. Your chapter about finding your why. I love how you open up by saying, what were you, 26, 28?
28, yeah.
Having an existential crisis, Yes, we all get there to that point. Like, what is my life even about? Why am I here? So take us to that point. Take us to that breaking point where you were literally feeling like, why am I on the planet?
Yeah. So I've had quite a past, as what I'm sure we'll get into. I left home when I was 16 for my own safety. I had to get away from my parents. So I'd been in the working world full time since I was legally old enough to, 16. I'd just been surviving day to day. And I'd got to a point by about, I think it had been building for a couple of years, but by 26, I was very itchy and I was desperate for goals. 26 is the age that I signed up for my first marathon because I'd got to a point where I was like, I need to achieve something that's for me, something I can be proud of. And when I got to 28, I was coming out of a marriage. I was getting divorced. I was still doing these jobs that I'd been doing since I was 16 that were just making me survive paycheck to paycheck. And, they serve you up until a certain point. They keep the roof over your head. But they were not fulfilling. And I knew that I wasn't fulfilling my potential. And I was so frustrated. And people around me were frustrated too. It wasn't just me. I talked in the book about my boss at the time, and I looked at him and I think he felt pretty much the same about his life. He didn't seem to be fulfilled either. And being so disillusioned in my job and looking up to this, he was a role model at the time, looking up to him and being like, he's disillusioned too. Is this all I've got to look forward to?
Yeah.
This is what I have to look up to. Is this what's next? Is it I become him? That wasn't okay for me. And that's when I really hit the wall and just had my little existential meltdown at my desk.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to dig up anything that you don't want to talk about, but you left home at 16 and you said you had to get away from your parents, plural. So it wasn't just one, it was both of them?
Yeah, it was a very dysfunctional relationship. I figured that my dad was always the worst of the two evils. I felt like my mum was just sort of trapped in an unfortunate situation. She'd got married to this guy who wasn't nice to her, and as a result, she wasn't nice to me, her firstborn. It's that, that kicking downwards that people do. You see it in the workplace too. You've got a horrible boss, so the middle manager kicks downwards to the team. Same deal. So I couldn't really trust either of them, so I got out of there. But I've had so much therapy now that I'm pretty okay talking about it.
Okay. So here you are, you're at your desk, you're having a meltdown. At this point, you're 28, and you had experienced bullying again on the job. So it sounds like some of these life patterns, it's like the people you think you should be able to look up to, your parents, not so much. Then you get into a job situation hoping you can look up to this person, and not so much. So what happened next?
Yeah, God, these patterns really do repeat. So the thing that happened next, when I hit this wall of existential dread, of I can't go out this way, I can't live the rest of my life with this pointlessness and then just perish. There was a lot of crying. I think you have to go right down before you come up again often. And there was an awful lot of crying and sort of hopelessness at first, because when you hit a wall, you know that something's got to change, but you don't necessarily know what into. So there's this sort of void at the bottom of, I'm at the bottom, I need to change something. I don't know what to do to make that change and come back up again. And so I really had to find some inspiration from somewhere. And someone that inspired me was my flatmate at the time, Kareen. If I'm honest, it'd be funny if she watches this. Kareen, I was a bit jealous of you. She had a really good life. She had a lovely family, lovely sisters. She'd gone to university, and even before she'd graduated, she secured a really kick-ass job. She's got a great life now. She lives in Sydney and works in TV. She's doing really well. But I was her flatmate at the time, so I would see her life sort of in my face every day, and I'd be like, man, I want what she's got. She seemed to have, a really good start in life. So I kind of took her as my inspiration. I was like, she went to uni. I thought that was really cool. At the age of 28, I was older than the average student, but I thought, I've always been a bit jealous of the kids that grew up with nice parents who supported them, who got to do the things that typical teenagers get to do. They get to stay at home a few more years past 16. They get to go study and be financially supported. And I was jealous of that. I'm happy to admit that. So I decided I would apply for university. And luckily, in the UK, there are funding options available for everyone. So it's not cheap. I spent the best part of 30K on student loans, so tuition, living support, all those sorts of things. And of course, I needed a part-time job all throughout the 4 years of my studies. But it was doable. I did the maths. I realized that it was completely doable to send myself to university. I didn't have to sit there and just say, oh, it's so unfair, everybody else gets to go. No, there are things that you can do. So I did it. I applied for the funding. I got it. And then I found the course that I wanted.
Wow. What do you think it is in your character that allowed you to just sort of say, okay, I might be jealous of what these other people have, but rather than complaining, what is it about you that allowed you to just sort of dig deep and say, well, fine, I'll get a loan. I'll go to school. I'll do this, even if I am older than everyone.
Good old British stubbornness. I think, and this reminds me of Todd Malloy's conversation with you about his chapter in the book, Rise and Shine, because Todd was talking about how you have to have a perspective shift before you can move yourself forward. And I remember you asking him, but how do you do that? Because it's really hard to change your perspective when you're right in that sort of victim mentality. And I had been in victim mentality for a really long time. And I think what first inspired me to get out of it was discovering the personal development world. And I had discovered that a long time ago. I think the first personal development book I read was called Help Yourself, and it was by Dave Pelzer. Dave Pelzer is famous for the A Child Called It trilogy. So I think he was the second ever worst reported case of child abuse in the US. Wow. And he wrote about it in a trilogy. And then the fourth book he wrote was Help Yourself, his personal development book. And that was the first one I picked up, just randomly, read it, and just it really spoke to me. Because I thought, wow, if this guy, with what he's been through, if he can pull himself out of it and find positivity and help other people as well. That was my inspiration to begin with. And then I got further into personal development and all the classics at the time. So is it Fiona Harold? Be your own life coach.
Yeah.
That was a classic.
I remember
that.
meeting her earlier this year.
Yes, we saw her at Expert Empires. And I did tell her actually that she was one of the very first personal development authors that got me into that world. And that was really cool to meet her actually. So yeah, that was really what started to dig me mentally out of my sort of deep hole of woe is me. And that and a bit of British stubbornness.
Well, thank heavens for that. And so what did you do? I mean, you were there crying at your desk, having this moment of, why am I here? What happened next?
Well, thank God for the internet. having the internet right in front of you. Oh, my goodness. I don't know quite how I'd have responded if I didn't have Google in front of me, but I started on work time. Sorry, boss. Started looking up how do you get a student loan. I think I even applied in my lunch break and just started searching for courses that inspired me. And then I found the one. And the one was? It was called Psychology with Neuroscience, but during the time that I applied to the time the course started, they'd kind of changed it and made it even cooler, and it ended up becoming the Bachelor's in Cognitive Neuroscience. And it was the first year that the University of Westminster had run it, so it was almost like they made it for me. It was brand new, and me and this course just found each other. And I'd always been into psychology. I'd always been fascinated since childhood, because being aware of the weirdness in my home and the weird dynamic with my parents, part of me was obviously very close to it, but there was a little part of me that was a bit removed from it as well, that would look at it and be like, what's going on with these two people? And it's really, I was really interested in the dynamic and how people become the way they are. Also, in my early 20s, a bit of a sideline, but I'd done a little bit of Open University correspondence course as well. I'd studied psychology then. And what with reading all these personal development and self-help books, I got a real taste for it. So I knew I wanted to study the mind, and then finding a course that combined the study of the mind with the biological study of the brain made it so much cooler, so much cooler to put some real science to it. So I was desperate that they were going to let me on this course. And when I interviewed for it, I don't think the guy dared turn me down. I was just so in his face. I was like, you're going to accept me, right? And they took me, and I had to do a foundation year, so an extra year, which is 4 years of study in total, because I had no A-levels. I just left home with my GCSEs, which is in the UK, that's your high school graduation. And I just left and gone out to work. So I had very little academia behind me. I think probably doing the Open University correspondence course had gone in my favour a little bit. But also, I believe universities are meant to take on a small percentage of mature students just to show willing to have a bit of diversity in age range. So all of that went in my favor, and I got on.
Wow, it's amazing. I know that everyone says hindsight is 20/20, but like your perspective, looking back on things, you even talk about it in your chapter in Time to Rise, how you can see that, yes, this was an awful breaking point, but you could start to see these patterns that sometimes you needed pain to motivate you to move and to go forward. Oh, yeah. So what was it like? Were you so in love with the subject matter that it didn't bother you that you had to do this extra foundational year, that you were older? I mean, what was it like kind of mixing in then with these university students?
So awkward. So awkward. I'm quite an introvert anyway, so I don't mix well with others at the best of times, but put me in a room with people who are 8 to 10 years younger than me, and yeah, it was awkward. I mean, I very much enjoyed the subject matter, and the foundation year wasn't pure psychology or neuroscience. It was general biosciences, because everyone who did that foundation year were going to split off into different courses. So it was very broad the first year, and subject-wise, I was a bit frustrated that I wasn't yet doing the neuroscience. But at the same time, I was learning stuff that I had no idea about. So it was kind of obvious that I had to learn it because I didn't know basic cell science. So I had to learn that stuff. But yeah, my classmates were so much younger than me, and their attitude was so different. That was kind of frustrating because a lot of them, they don't know how good they've got it. They don't know that they're lucky to have parents who support them. They don't know that they're lucky to have their tuition fees paid for them. They don't know what it is to not have those things. So, the rational part of my brain wants to be all nice and non-judgmental about it and say, hey, that's cool, it's not your fault. But the stressy, caffeinated, judgmental part of me wants to be like, will you shut up? I'm trying to learn, And there was giggling and hangovers and just, the worst bit was when we had to do group projects together, because there is no opting out of that. Sometimes as part of the curriculum, you have to work as a team. And that was the worst, because your mark was a group mark. It depended on your classmates pulling their socks up and doing, that's such a British thing to say, isn't it? Pull your socks up and do your work. And not everyone was up for it. So I was intensely frustrated. But at the same time, there were a couple of other older students as well. So me and them really had something to bond over, the fact that the kids were annoying us.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, there's another topic in your chapter in the book that I'd love to touch on. When we get back from the break, I'd love to explore how you really saw this idea of mentorship as being really fundamental to one's success, which is pretty obvious. When we come from a family that's not full of mentors, we start to look outside for people to help us and guide us. But I'd love to get your take when we come back. Tune in daily to get fired up with insight and inspiration for purposeful living, conscious relationships, and soulful success. You're watching Liberate Your Authentic Self with me, Dr. Andrea Pennington. Check out the live version of this show, where I answer your questions in real time. Visit facebook.com/Dr. Andrea Pennington. So she left home at 16. She ends up as a table dancer, puts herself through university, and now is doing social media marketing for some pretty fabulous people, myself included. And she's even written her own book, The Musings of a, self-induced orphan?
Elective orphan.
An elective orphan. And she is the contributing author to Time to Rise, with her chapter about finding my why. So you've gotten us to the point where coaching didn't quite work out, but you discovered that you could do some marketing. You kind of showed a little case study of you marketing your own book. How did you get from there to where you are today, and what does the future hold?
Okay, so from taking that job, that kept me very busy for 2 years, and I learnt so much working for a small team compared to just marketing my own book. So I learnt sales, I learnt Google ads, I learnt about search engine optimization. I went very wide, but not very deep. So after 2 years of that, when I decided to go freelance, I thought I need to bring in the width and get a bit of depth. So I cut down from doing a little bit of every aspect of marketing down to just focusing on the things that I'm the best at. So for me, it's social media engagement and it's content and copywriting. Because you might have noticed, because I'm in a few books, I kind of like to write. So yeah, I really enjoy blogging and creating content. So when I left the coaching school, I knew a lot of life coaches. And they really became my tribe, my people that needed my help, because they were very much like me. They'd gone for a career change. So they were my age or older. They'd had a job before. Perhaps they were corporate. Perhaps they were something else. I don't think many of them were table dancers, or not that they told me about, but all sorts of, wide variety to their background. And then they'd gone to the school to learn to become a coach instead, and they'd graduate and they'd get their qualification and they were now accredited. And then they were like, what do I do? How do I find clients? So, and the school would teach them that to some degree as well, but some of them wanted more one-on-one stuff, or even to have stuff done for them. So they would approach me and be like, hey, can you help me set up a website? Can you help me set up a blog? Can you help me with a social campaign? And that became my work. Very quickly, it became my full-time work, and that's kept me busy for the last couple of years. And today I'm getting to a point where I'm pretty tired. I've been doing a lot for the last couple of years. I've learned a lot and it's been amazing, but also I know that it's time to scale up and change my model of what I offer. So I'm going to be doing less of the done for you stuff and more of the teaching so that I can help groups of people and just reach more people in one go. And it still stays affordable.
Yeah. And one of the things I noticed that you have coming up is like a writing course, a blog writing, just to help people. And you're right, there's so many people who say, I know I need to be blogging, but it's that blank computer screen, or it's like, how do I come up with fresh ideas? So when does that course start?
So it's a 1 day, well, it's just 3 hours, in fact. It's a masterclass, and the first one is Saturday, the 30th of December. And it's just online. So via Zoom, there'll be a small group of us. I'll be teaching. It'll be very interactive. So you don't have to turn your camera on if you're shy, but I'd rather you did jump in, talk to me, ask me questions, because the more you ask me, the more I can help. I'm going to be demonstrating how I write a blog post from scratch. And I'm even going to do a demo live with one of the students. So I'm going to throw it to the floor and say, someone give me a random jumping off point, and then I'm going to turn that into a blog post for that person and show them how easy it is. Because you're right, it's the blank screen that freaks people out. You're overthinking it, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, your head is full of content. You've got like 50 blog posts in there every day. You don't know how to pick it out from the noise. That's the trick. So that's what I'll be teaching. And this first one, I'm charging £35 a ticket, and the whole ticket price goes to my charity. I'm doing the London Marathon this year in April, and I'm collecting for our local animal charity, Blue Cross. So all proceeds go to cats and dogs in need, which is something I'm very passionate about.
Yes, I noticed. Oh, that's
I'm a mad cat lady.
Yes, you're always trying to rescue or get some pet adopted. It's beautiful. So that's the copywriting course. And then what about the social media marketing?
Yeah, so over the Christmas break, I've given myself some time to just sit and plan out my curriculum for 2018. So at the moment, if you go to my website, sarahkbrandis.com, if you go to the Learn With Me tab, you'll see a place where you can register your interest for which type of course you're interested in. And then you'll get email updates when my full curriculum is ready for you to peruse and inspect and see which one you like the look of. And then it will be bookable early January. So.
Wow. Well, I'm very grateful that you have time working with me and some of our fabulous clients and authors and so on. So now you feel like you've found your groove, yeah? So the writing, the blogging, the social media marketing, helping some others, but also now getting into a bigger teacher role. Do you think that's going to satisfy you for a while?
Oh, I mean, I can be pretty intense. You might have noticed. So if I get a new idea, I'll run with it. And I have got this big dream of running a cat sanctuary one day. But so that might distract me a couple of years down the line. But for right now, I feel like I've found my tribe. I've found my thing. I've got the thing that I love and the people that need the thing that I love. And that's really, really satisfying. And I've rescued 3 cats in my house and one more that has gone to a farm. So that will keep me quiet on the cat front for a while. So yeah, I think I'm pretty happy for the next couple of years. And I've got great people around me right now. I've got some fantastic mentors, your good self included. And that's essential. And I think that's been something that's made all the difference to me. Finding the right path in life has been about getting the right people around me, because the further I got into personal development and the more good people I've begun working with, the more positivity I've had around me, the more you start to see the potential and believe what's possible for you. And that makes all the difference.
Yeah. Well, how awesome is that? Especially from whence you came, which was not a lot of positivity, not a lot of hope, but thankfully this circuitous path has led you to the place that you are today. And I'm so happy to know you. I'm so happy that we get to work together week after week, because you're awesome at what you do. And I mean that genuinely.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Sarah, thank you again for contributing your story in Time to Rise. I think it's going to really help a lot of people put into perspective that just because we have a rocky start in life doesn't mean you can't pick yourself up, get yourself to where you want to go, and allow yourself to kind of stumble and bumble through until you really do find that thing that lights you up.
Yeah. That's the one thing I'd like people to know is just it. I mean, take me for an example. I've been to some dark, silly and crazy places, and I'm fine now. So I think just stay positive, get some good role models and mentors, and just keep going forward. And if I can do it, anyone can.
I love it. Wise words. Well, thank you, my friend. I look forward to spending even more time with you in 2018. So for those of you out there, if you would like to tap into what Sarah's got on tap, just visit sarahkbrandis.com. And of course, all of the links are in the description for the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this interview. Please support the author by buying the book on Amazon or your favorite retailer. And if you enjoyed this interview, then please click that like button and share it with someone else who needs a little bit of positivity in their world. If you or somebody you know wants to get their message out to the world, then be sure to check out our publishing options at makeyourmarkglobal.com. We publish the work of healers, coaches, lightworkers, and other soul-inspired authors and entrepreneurs who really want to have an extraordinary impact in the world. Just check us out at makeyourmarkglobal.com. Until next time, my friend, please know that you are a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. Much love. How do you pick yourself up when life knocks you down? Perseverance, grit, determination, resilience. These words describe natural human qualities which help us bounce back after any type of setback. Illness, loss, betrayal, bankruptcy, divorce, abuse, and trauma. No one is immune to experiencing the tragedies of life at some point. Learning how to use your potential to rise again is what will keep you going. I'm Dr. Andrea Pennington, creator and publisher of Time to Rise. In Time to Rise, 29 inspiring changemakers share their personal stories of transformation to prove that you can reclaim your life, find your purpose, and re-emerge as the powerful creator that you are. It can be tempting to think that the people who succeed in life or who recover after major devastating loss are special or somehow endowed with magical powers. The reality is, within you are the very same powers. You have the potential to live a life of meaning and purpose in alignment with your values. You have the right and the power to reclaim wellness, live with vitality, and enjoy real happiness. Get your copy of Time to Rise and enjoy free gifts with your purchase. May this book help you reconnect to who you really are. May you find peace and hope. May you claim this moment as your time to rise. Visit timetorise.me and buy the book anywhere books are sold.